Thank you. Who is Jane Austen? 35 seconds wasted. Okay, she's the woman on the English £10 note. She took over in 2013 from a guy you might have heard of called Charles Darwin. That's the level of fame we're working with here. How did she achieve this level of fame? Well, okay, she's apart from her exalted heist career, she's known as a novelist. She was born in 1775, so just after the start of the American War of Independence. Died in 1817, so just after the end of the Napoleonic Wars. She was the seventh child of eight of a rural priest called the Reverend George Austen. She only had 2 years of formal education when she was sent away to boarding school. Pretty much the whole of the rest of the time, she was self-taught by reading. And during her lifetime, she published 4 novels, and then her family published another couple of novels the year she died. All 6 of those are part of not only the canon of English literature, but like the broader Western canon. And more importantly, they are actually fun to read. Stephen Fry once wrote that like some artists, what they do for the world, and it is of course magnificent. But others, you tell people how much you like them, and they say, yes, I like them too. But you know deep down inside, only you really get it. And Jane Austen is very much one of these authors, and this is why to this day people continue to read her books. They've been continually in print since the 1830s. There is a movie made of one of her books roughly once a year. There are fan clubs all over the world. There is published like commercial Jane Austen fan fiction written by established authors like P.D. James. They continue to be very popular. I have not seen all 70 odd movie adaptations of Jane Austen movies, not least because some of them are in Tamil. I've watched about a dozen over the last few months. One thing I think is quite interesting is like looking at these, taking number of adaptations as a proxy for belovedness. You can see that Pride and Prejudice is by far the best known and the best loved of her books. But actually, it's surprisingly even. Like if I had done this graph for Mary Shelley, it would be 30 adaptations of Frankenstein and 1 adaptation of her other 6 books put together, which no one has ever heard of. The data comes from the Wikipedia. They have a timeline of Jane Austen adaptations, so I just entered it and then put it into Google Slides. So it's not too bad. So thank you. Yeah, showing this diagram for the 4th time, the 3rd or 4th time, I think, in a Wednesday talk. So we are over here, hidden under Demos's head in the 4th Industrial Revolution. Jane Austen is over here, square in the 1st Industrial Revolution. That kind of doesn't quite explain things right, because all of this stuff happened. The 1st Industrial Revolution was there, but it was very unevenly distributed. So the world she writes about is largely pre-industrialized. People travel by carriages. There are no steam trains. There is no modern medicine. But I mean, zooming in a bit, we can see things like the first vaccination happened during her lifetime. Mark Brunel's Portsmouth Block Mills, which was the first mechanized mass production factory, was built during her life. That's actually briefly mentioned in Mansfield Park. The first steam locomotive, I think, 1802. And then just after she died, we start to see things like the difference engine. Queen Victoria was born a bit after she died. And there are major political events like the Atlantic slave trade being banned. We have the American, French, and Haitian revolutions. And also, we have the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. So basically, her entire adult life, Britain was at war with someone. It was an incredibly tumultuous period. But you wouldn't know it from her books unless you read them quite carefully, because she is a member of the landed gentry, which is the class kind of just below the aristocracy. So her characters generally don't have titles, but they do own property. The ideal in that class is to live off your rental income. There's a very small set of jobs that you're allowed to do that are socially fitting. And because she's writing about the world of women, you see this sort of very domestic sphere. It's all about marriages, it's about balls, but then just little hints of the tumultuous times she was living in kind of leak in around the edges, and it's quite fun to watch for those. So yeah, language-wise, I think everyone in this company speaks English more than good enough to understand. She's a lot easier to read than many later authors. She does use a lot of very long sentences, but occasionally you come across words where they are now fallen out of use or have changed meanings. So I can hardly keep my hands warm even in my muff. Back then, of course, a muff was a sort of furry, hand-warming thing. Nowadays, a muff is a concrete thing on the base of an electricity pylon. So the language is intelligible. I mean, this is my culture we're reading about. This is British culture. Many of the places are places that I've been to. It feels like I ought to understand this, and yet the much greater problem than the language is the culture, is the social expectations. This title is wrong. So in psychology, weird has a specific meaning. In As you know, psychology is undergoing a crisis, largely because a lot of the crucial experiments were done on so-called weird people, namely Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Jane Austen's people in the Regency period were not yet industrialized and democratic, so they are were people. Regency, by the way, this is the name of the period because the King George III was mad. His son, the future King George IV, was the Prince Regent who was ruling in his place.
Is that where the Regent's Park come from?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Anything like named after Regent something is probably named after George IV. Yeah. So, for instance, in Mansfield Park, a character, in order to impress the woman he loves, goes to his stepfather, who is an admiral, and says, "Can you get her brother promoted to lieutenant?" And absolutely no part of this plan would work now, because you'd go to your stepfather and say, "Can you get this guy promoted?" And he'd say, "I'm not going to compromise national security in order for you to get your end away." And then even if you could succeed, then you go to the girl and say, "Hi, I got your brother promoted." And she'd be like, "Thanks, I guess that's kind of strange." But yeah, back then, the families, in line with most non-weird cultures, family was very important. If your family could do her family a favor and thereby improve her material circumstances, that was a big deal. So let's talk about the books. Finally, only 10 minutes in. So starting with the first book that she published, Sense and Sensibility. So it was published in 1810. She started working on it in the early 1790s when she was a teenager. So it's a satire of the novels of sensibility that were very common at the time. Sensibility at the time, it meant something more like sensitivity, we'd say. So there are two. I don't think what's these chats popping up. There are the two main characters are two sisters, Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood. Eleanor is the sensible one, the rational one. Sorry. Yeah, Eleanor is sense, Marianne is sensibility. So Eleanor is the rational one who believes in upholding the social norms and doing the right thing and living within her budget and all these sorts of things. Whereas Marianne is much more in touch with her emotions, and she doesn't believe in talking to people she doesn't like, and she believes in like going out for long walks in the rain when she's feeling moody and coming down with a horrible cold. And you would not know it from most of the movies, but a significant part of the book is devoted to taking the piss out of Marianne for being a massive drama queen. Next up, Pride and Prejudice. So this is probably the best known, certainly the best known. I'd recommend the one to start with. This is the first line of it. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And right there, it's subverting the whole premise of this novel of romance. So the plot is we have the five Bennet sisters. Their estate is entailed away down the male line, so they will not inherit. So they need to get married, or they are looking down the barrel of a life of poverty. So no pressure there. And then these two handsome, rich young men here, Simon played by Simon Woods and Matthew McFadden, I think, from the 2005 edition, arrive in the neighbourhood, and all the mothers say, "This is great. Our daughters will absolutely want to marry them. There is no thought of considering their wishes in this." So yeah, it's kind of it's joking about this sort of social expectation here. Can't remember. There's something else I was going to say about it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah, Mansfield Park. This was the most commercially successful in the book, in a book that she made in her lifetime. But it's not so much liked these days. Several people told me, like, don't bother with Mansfield Park. It's and I mean, the thing is, the heroine is she's brought up by her rich aunt and uncle, and they never lose an opportunity to tell her that she is the poor relation. She should be very grateful to them, and she is nothing. And consequently, she is very passive. She has a huge amount of learned helplessness. By modern views, she's a non-player character. She's a drip. But then, as the book goes on, you learn how she got that way. But yeah, apparently they loved it back in Regency England. Nowadays, I think modern readers tend to prefer the character Mary Crawford, who has these lines here, because she's more active, she's more spiky, she's more fun. Based, I believe, on Jane Austen's cousin Eliza, whose first husband was murdered in the French Revolution, and she came back with all these sort of exciting stories of life in France. So yeah, Emma, this is the one I'm currently reading because I didn't manage to finish it in time. Final book she published in her lifetime. Opinion is very divided on it. So some people absolutely hate Emma. They think she's an incredibly annoying character and they can't get past it. Some people think it is her best book and a huge technical innovation in the craft of writing a novel, which was quite a young art form at this time, because it has a heroine who is so annoying. I don't think that. I actually really like Emma. I'm really enjoying spending time in her head. So yeah, Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. The plot is that Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, gets two of her friends, sets them up, and they get married. She decides that she is a great matchmaker and she's going to set all of her friends up. Spoilers, no, she is terrible at it. And yeah, she's very meddlesome, she's very snobbish, she is constantly interfering, but she means well and she's so adorably clueless. So yeah, sadly, Jane Austen died in the summer of 1817 at the age of 41. We don't know what killed her. It may have been a disorder of the adrenal glands called Addison's disease. It may have been Hodgkin's lymphoma. It may have been a recurrence of the typhus that she got when she was a 7-year-old at boarding school. But her family published 2 books. So Northanger Abbey, she'd actually sold much earlier, and then the publisher just sat on it. And so they bought the copyright back and published it again. Don't know what the hell the publisher was thinking of. This is a satire of Gothic horror novels, which she was a huge fan of. And the heroine has just read so many Gothic horrors that she thinks she sees everything as a horror novel. So when she gets invited to Northanger Abbey, she thinks, oh, the mother's dead. She must have been murdered. Oh, wait, no, maybe she's still alive and she's being kept in a cell. But no, her threat model is totally wrong. This is not what's happening at all. By the way, these books, they are all real. They until about 1950, Jane Austen scholars thought she'd made the names up, but actually someone went and checked. Those are all real novels. They have now been republished as a collection called The Seven Horrid Novels. And then the final one, Persuasion. This is the last novel she finished before she died, and it's kind of a sad one. The backstory is that Anne Elliot, the heroine, fell in love years ago with a handsome young naval officer with no money or prospects, and then her family broke them up. And now he's back, he's left the Navy, he's got a fortune of Spanish gold, and he's ready to be married. And they are both convinced that the other hates them and that they're never getting back together. And partly because they're really geeky themselves and very socially awkward, and partly because of the kind of social constraints they're operating under, they can't talk to each other about it. So yeah, I think the world is crying out for a modern day adaptation of Persuasion set in the tech industry, because where else are you going to get socially awkward geeks with lots of money? There is also some DLC. So this Sanditon, which is an unfinished novel, Lady Susan, which she wrote, I guess maybe thought it was a bit too racy to publish, and Love and Friendship, History of England. These are satires she wrote when she was a teenager. And about 150 of her letters survive. She was a voluminous correspondent to her family, but her sister Cassandra burned the majority of them when she died. I'm not entirely sure why. Possibly, I think Cassandra said something about she didn't want to expose the nieces and nephews to Jane's somewhat sharp opinions of people, which unfortunately means we've lost them as well. But this was generally her family. They tried to make money out of it. They tried to soften her image. So, like on the left here, we have the only known portrait of Jane Austen made during her lifetime. This is a sketch done by her sister Cassandra in about 1805. Cassandra and Jane were very close friends throughout their shared lives. And over on the right, this is the picture from the 1869 authorized biography put out by the family. As you can see, they have literally rounded her edges off. Could not ask for a more perfect visual metaphor. So yeah, there's a lot going on in Jane Austen books. So the first one is obviously the girl meets boy romance plot. I think if you haven't read any Jane Austen or haven't really seen the movies, then that's maybe all you know about it, that they are most famous for being romance novels. But there's a lot more going on. Second layer, my God, look at these idiots. It is very sharp social satire of Regency society in particular, but just human folly in general. And this is the layer that I most enjoy, I think. Just, oh man, I had so many highlights in my Kindle app from reading all of them. But yeah, next layer, and this is maybe not so implicit. This is more implicit than explicit, but actually, all of these ridiculous social games that they're playing, this is serious. Like the Bennet sisters, if they don't get married, they are going to starve. There's a bit that a couple of her novels, someone runs off with someone inappropriate, and all of the remaining family say, that's it, we're ruined. Like, no one will talk to us anymore, no one will marry us. They have ruined all of our prospects. So yeah, there is these sort of like frothy status games, they have real bite to them. But worse than that, Regency society itself is this elaborate polite fiction, but base reality can intrude at any time. People can and do get ill and die suddenly. The reason there are so many handsome young officers around is because it's the Napoleonic Wars. That dockyard that Lieutenant Price is so keen to show his daughter. That's the Industrial Revolution. The world is changing. So with all those layers, it is actually pretty hard to do justice to a Jane Austen book on screen. Particularly the layer 3, explaining the stakes to the audience, I think is challenging, but nonetheless, people try. So as you can see, this goes back pretty much to the beginning of cinema. I think this one's actually Wikipedia vandalism, but this one is definitely real because I've seen it, and that's the Laurence Olivier Pride and Prejudice movie. But yeah, just eyeballing this graph, you can see that something happened in 1995, right? So what happened in 1995 was these two. So this is Ang Lee's deservedly Oscar-winning Sense and Sensibility, starring and adapted by Emma Thompson. So Emma Thompson was Eleanor, Kate Winslet was Marianne. I think it was Kate Winslet's breakout role, certainly her first kind of really big role. It's very good. Emma Thompson's Oscar speech is so lovely. The other really big thing that happened that year in Jane Austen fandom was the BBC's Pride and Prejudice adaptation. So the BBC's mission is to inform, educate, and entertain, and so they have been making Jane Austen adaptations along with other classic authors pretty much the whole time. But until 1995, they did not have the budget to do it right. So this was when that changed. So this was Colin Firth's breakout role, and this was genuinely a massive cultural event at the time. Anyone who was watching TV in the 90s probably remembers this. In particular, they remember the bit where Colin Firth dives into the lake and emerges with a dripping wet shirt, which is not in the book, by the way. But it's one of those things like now you kind of have to do it. So I was actually at high school at the time studying Pride and Prejudice for my exams, and yeah, we watched this as it was going through, and yeah, it was great. It was a really good educational tool, and I think it's one of the things that helped me fall in love with the book. Some other worthwhile adaptations, as previously there's loads of them, but I want to call out these ones in particular. So the 2008 BBC Sense and Sensibility miniseries. By the way, the answer to the question, which is the most book accurate adaptation, is always the BBC miniseries. But this one is also actually good, it's good as a piece of art as well. Thought it was really good. From Prada to Nada, I mean, it is good. I did enjoy it, but it's mostly in here for the title. It's a modern day adaptation of Sense and Sensibility set among Mexican Americans in LA. A lot of kind of interesting stuff. They replace a lot of the class dynamics with sort of internalized racism. Which makes it sound way more serious and worthy than it actually is. Do recommend. The 2020 Emma adaptation with Anya Taylor-Joy. This was the director's first feature film. Previously, she was a still photographer. She really shoots it like that. Every shot could just be a magazine cover. It's so beautiful. Taylor-Joy is very good. Generally, good performances. Do recommend. Also, the Kate Beckinsale Emma from '96, also pretty good. Do not bother with the '96 Gwyneth Paltrow one. And finally, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. This is a web series, modern day. The idea is that Lizzie from Pride and Prejudice and her siblings and friends, talk into the camera, vlog style. So this gives you the kind of the insight into what's going on in their heads that you would normally get from the narrator. So yeah, very well done. Do recommend. None of these are my favorite Jane Austen adaptation, which I think you've probably guessed by now. Yes, thank you. It is such a good film. 1990. So yes, also from the Jane Austen Annus Mirabilis of 1995. It is an adaptation of Emma set in a high school in Beverly Hills. Cher is absolutely the perfect translation of Emma into the modern day. So much fun to spend time with, so clueless. And the film itself is just wonderfully quotable. So, in conclusion, read the books. Yes, all of them. Watch some of the adaptations. So I have prepared the spreadsheet, which I made the graphs. I've been putting like notes and ratings on. So feel free to use that, or just ask me. I will happily talk your ear off about Jane Austen adaptations. You'll have difficulty stopping me. And it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty. Thank you very much. Cool.
Is it allowable to watch the adaptations before I read the books,
Yes.
or is the order?
Good question. So I watched Emma before reading. I watched 4 adaptations of Emma before reading the books. Generally, I think that's probably the right way to do it, actually. So you get the plot and then you can enjoy the language. But I've mostly been reading the book and then watching the adaptations. One tip for Sense and Sensibility, which is the thing I wanted to say earlier. When you read the first chapter, draw your own little family tree, because it's quite a complex set of characters. But if you get halfway through and then think, oh, who is Lady Middleton? And Google Sense and Sensibility family tree, you will get major spoilers. Yeah, do you recommend?
That almost sounds like the spoiler itself.
Start guessing. Yeah. Is there any of the or any of the layers that you referenced?
Yeah.
Is there any of them that are not often or at all dealt with by the adaptations that you would like to see?
Yeah. So I think what am I doing here? Yeah, thanks. I'll stop sharing. So I think the one that's very often missed is the "My God, they're idiots" layer. So as I said, with like particularly Sense and Sensibility, it's really hard to get a sense of just how much the narrator is making fun of Marianne if you're watching the film.
So it's "My God, idiots." It's not the girl who meets boy and them looking at the outside world.
No.
It's the narrator, including the protagonist.
Oh, yeah,
okay,
absolutely. Cool. Much of the protagonists are frequently idiots.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I thought that they're the ones who like think that everyone else is an idiot.
Yeah, I mean sometimes the protagonists are making fun of everyone else, but also they are usually being idiots themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I mean the what are the stakes thing, different adaptations do that more or less well.
What's the worst adaptation you've seen?
Worst adaptation I've seen, 1999 Billy Parker. What's her name? Who is it in Doctor Who played Rose?
Billy Piper.
Billy Piper, thank you. Mansfield Park. Not quite rescued by Haley Atwell's Mary Crawford.
So what makes it terrible?
They made a lot of changes to the book. They generally just made Fanny a lot more sassy. I see why they did it, but I don't think it works, and I think it fundamentally changes the story. And also, like they clearly made a lot of compromises to keep the budget low. So yeah, they cut some of my favorite scenes really. So yeah. Oh yeah, so one great in Mansfield Park. If you've done any amateur drama, then there is a very funny scene where all the inhabitants of the house try to put on a play together, and that was very recognizable. I like that a lot. Yeah.
If you were to guess which character Jane Austen would resonate most with, or kind of where she drew elements of her own self and put it into the character.
Good question. I mean, like none of her characters are strict self-inserts. I think Lizzie Bennet has a lot of Jane Austen in her. Yeah, I don't know. No, I don't think Eleanor Dashwood does. Yeah, probably Lizzie Bennet actually. Yeah. And I mean the fact that you have Jane and Lizzie have this very close relationship mirrors Jane and Cassandra Austen, I think, as well. So, yeah. Let's see, there are 21 messages in the chat. Finally happening, part 2. Are we sharing slides? Oh no, I'm so sorry. Yeah, oh man, I'm so sorry.
I got it eventually, though. Don't worry. It's only the first few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
Hey.
person to Moth. Oh, what was that picture? What was that? Oh,
Daniel pointing
my soul left. Which one's this? 2020 Emma is great. Yeah, absolutely agreed. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So I've read the comic of this. I've not read the book. A friend who worked on the movie explicitly told me not to bother with it.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's part of the fun of having a beloved author who's out of copyright is you can do this kind of thing. Yeah, there's also stuff like there's a murder mystery sequel to Pride and Prejudice by P.D. James. There's a series of novels about Lydia Bennet becoming a spy. There's a series of murder mysteries starring Jane Austen as the detective. Yeah, all this is like actually published. So.
I like the commentary there. There's like you referred to Muff and posted a picture of Danny. That's unfortunate. That was a great picture.
Lost in Austen.
If not, is it good?
So that one, it's not based on any of the books, I believe. It's just the idea that this modern day woman falls into like a Jane Austen novel.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Falls into like the world of Jane and meets Jane.
This is quite a big cast. Sorry, I'm just watching this trailer.
Yeah,
Quite a big cast for a
film.
for a film that only has 5.8 stars. Charles Dance isn't even one of the top 3 actors in the list on IMDb.
Okay, Lily James, Sam Riley, Johnston. Oh, that's very good casting for Wickham. I like it.
I don't know who any of these people are. Suki Waterhouse, yeah.
She's in a band. She's the Japanese
Sally, yeah.
She went to book.
Yeah, Charles Dance.
Sally Phillips rings a bell. Charles Bennett. Oh, good. Lena Headey.
They called in a lot of favors for this one.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That's what got that 0.8.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. Right.
I need to hop off, but thank you, Miles.
Sure.
The best introduction to these entertaining films I've ever had.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank
Cool.
you so much, Miles.